Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. But we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
And that's that. We can stand up and fight and ride all day through the night. We can make this change right and see our hopes and our dreams come to fruition. It's time to unite as one, calling out to our founding fathers. This is our mission to make you
Hey everyone, welcome to Humanity Awakened Radio. I'm your host, Phil McNamara. I'm here with my co-host once again, Brian Boland.
Hey guys.
And today we're going to review the new amazing X-Files shows that have been coming out. So, do you want to start, Brian? And
Sure, let's get right into it. So as we know, the two new X-Files just aired, and I just gotta say I was completely blown away.
me too.
There was just so much disclosure on that first episode. It was incredibly wild to listen to that. And not only that, I was just really impressed with, they really did a good job of making it special. It's the directing and everything was just so reminiscent of like the old 90s ways that, Chris Carter really captured those moments in the filming of that. And Mark, I forget his last name, but the guy doing the music was just so on point, and it was just, oh my god, even in the second episode, it was captured the old music of the old X-Files seasons, but in such a new modern way at the same time. It was just brilliant.
It takes a lot to make my jaw drop open, and I gotta tell you, both shows really, I listened to them and I was just blown away with the amount of information that a lot of us in the community are aware of that the general public at large doesn't know about yet. And it's real important to understand that what they were talking about are all things that are actually occurring on our planet right now. And it's real important that everybody take a really serious look at what they're saying, because this is actually happening now.
I want to say too, at the beginning, the intro, they did an incredible job of going over the X-Files mythos, as well as actual big dates in UFO lore, UFO history. They talked about Roswell, of course. They talked about the military-industrial complex speech, I believe. And they also, one date that they did get wrong, though, and I want to clear this up on the show right now, is they said in 1957, UFOs flew over the Capitol building, and it was actually 1952. Just to clear that up, I don't know why they put that date out as a different date, but besides that, there was one, I guess you could call it clerical error almost, Yeah. But, they also talked about Kenneth Arnold's sighting over the Cascade Mountains and Mount Rainier, seeing 9 disc-shaped craft, which looked like they were floating, skipping like rocks over water.
Yes.
And that's where the original term of flying saucer was coined in 1946. 1 year before, actually, was it 46, 47?
It was 46 or 47.
So that was before Roswell, actually. And there was many, many, many other UFO events that happened before Roswell. But as far as leading up to the X-Files mythos, I feel like they covered that really well. I mean, the acting could have been a little better, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt just because it's been 16 years or so since the last X-Files. They got to get back in their last season of X-Files. They got to get back in their groove. And also, I mean, let's just be real. X-Files was never really known for its acting, and if we just focus on that, we're gonna miss what's really happening on the show. And it's very clear that Chris Carter or someone is using this as a vehicle for disclosure.
Absolutely. I have never. I mean, I just watched that first episode, and I'm telling you, the things that I heard and the things that they said were so profound to me, and so they verified so many of the things that that I've believed for a long, long time. One of the main points of that was that that 9/11 was a false flag. I mean,
And I saw in an article too, the one that you sent to me, that this is the first time network television has actually used the words that alluded that 9/11 was an inside job or a false flag on network television. And it occurred to me that's probably true. I mean, it's a big deal for network television to come out and say all these things that it's just like something you don't do. Like, what's changed in the tide to be able to talk about these things?
Exactly. And that's, for me, I've done a lot of research into 9/11 and what went on during those days, and it was really kind of it was actually warmed my heart in a weird way to actually hear them say that, because that validates a lot of what a lot of people in this country are believe but are afraid to say. They're afraid to talk about this because they're going to be deemed as a crackpot. But we now know and they even mentioned this, and this was really, really powerful for me: problem, reaction, solution.
That hit me like a ton of bricks when they said that.
Oh my God. I just couldn't believe it. I wish I had David Icke's number. I would have called him on the phone and said, they said it.
I got to give them props too, like towards the end of the episode, like for nailing out the entire New World Order agenda in less than 2 minutes. In the way they did it was probably the most amazing thing that I have ever seen in my entire life. Because I mean, it's a big subject to talk about, and they literally talked about every single thing going on. They even mentioned, they didn't say chemtrails or geoengineering, but they were talking about that. And they're trying to poison our food and doing all this, and it was just
the term that they use is called a soft kill. It's not a direct kill, because that would just look blatantly evil. They're doing it through our water, through our food, through manipulation of our weather. All of these things. And it sounds, people say, oh, well, that's just conspiracy. Well, you know what? Conspiracy is a group of people colluding together in secret to create some sort of an agenda. And that's exactly what they're doing. There's no question of this now. This was on national television. People are talking about this. I'm sure that it's hit the mainstream media, but I don't really watch any of that because it gives me an anxiety attack. So I don't watch it. But, I mean, let's get into a little bit of some of the stuff that they talked about so you can get an idea. Please look all of this stuff up. Please, 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 please.
Yeah, definitely look this stuff up. So some of the things that they talked about at the very beginning, I'm just going to go note by note that I have when I was watching this. At the very beginning, the scene where, spoiler alerts, by the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely watch this episode and
then come back to us.
Watch the X-Files first episode, then come back and listen. So the beginning where there's a man in a bus riding and blacked out windows. This was completely reminiscent of Bob Lazar's story. If you guys don't know who Bob Lazar was, he came forward in I think it was 89. George Knapp, who's now one of the hosts on Coast to Coast AM Sunday nights, he was working at I think it was KLAS TV in Nevada, and he was the one who broke Bob's story of him working at Area 51's S4 in Groom Lake, Nevada. Now, Bob was the guy who really brought this whole Area 51 thing to the surface. And nobody had even heard of Area 51 before this. So if you wonder where that whole lore came from, Bob Lazar is the guy you need to look up. When I saw this first interview that he did 6 years ago or so, 7 years ago, whenever it was, it completely woke me up. And intuitionally, I knew that there was something to this guy's story. And they actually never mentioned Bob's name in the X-Files episode, but there's some other things that he was talking about in his testimony that they brought up in the show. There is the part where they are showing Mulder the ARV, the alien reproduction vehicle.
That was incredible.
That was so incredible that they actually used that term. I mean, let's just be real. I've seen all the X-Files episodes maybe like twice. They always just kind of tease you towards what they're talking about. I mean, this episode was just so many gem bombstones that it was just like, this was so much more disclosure than any of the 9 seasons combined in this one episode. They talked about the fuel source that the ARV was running off of.
Correct.
Was called Element 115. And they just said it and didn't really get into much detail on this, but this is exactly what Bob Lazar said that the craft that he was working on at S4 in Area 51 were running off of. It was the fuel source. Now, I actually have an article with a quote from, I believe it's a quote from Bob Lazar, talking about how Element 115 worked. And this is from a website called gravitywarpdrive.com. End quote. Inside the reactor, Element 115 is bombarded with a proton, which plugs into the nucleus of the 115 atom and becomes Element 116, which immediately decays and releases or radiates small amounts of antimatter. So basically, they're saying that this Element 115 is not stable. And I also want to make it clear that Bob specifically stated that at the time of his testimony, Element 115 was not naturally occurring on Earth at that time. And I think he said the U.S. was in possession of like 100,000 tons of this stuff. They probably ran out or found some new ways to make more, who knows? But I do know now that in 2003, scientists have created their own synthetic version of Element 115. And it is unstable, just like Bob says, but it only lasts for about a second, so we cannot use it as a fuel source as of now. Sorry, guys.
No.
So, continuing on with the quote, the antimatter is released into a tuned tube, which keeps it from reacting with the matter that surrounds it. It is then directed towards a gaseous matter target at the end of the tube. The matter and antimatter collide and annihilate, totally converting into energy. The heat from this reaction is converted into electrical energy in a near 100% efficient thermoelectric generator. Element 115 is a super heavy element probably found on a planet of a binary star system. End quote. So, I mean, this is really incredible stuff that they actually talked about that on the X-Files. I mean, how many people are watching that episode? I really want to find out the numbers. And this is like straight disclosure in your face.
Yeah, exactly. And the other piece that I found particularly amazing was the whole abduction scenario.
They did not waste any time with that.
They really did.
They just
got
laid out
right
the
into
entire alien abduction scenario in 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And like, you can tell they were sitting in a room and said, how do we word this in the most efficient, effective way in the shortest amount of time to get all this in one episode?
And so, for me, they
talked about the scoop marks.
The scoop marks, the entire premise of the idea that the character, and I can't remember what her name was because I don't.
I think it was Sveta.
Sveta, thank you. She announces that the baby that she'd been carrying was taken, and when Mulder goes back and re-interviews her, finds out that it wasn't taken by an alien at all. It was taken by men.
This is also referred to in the UFO community as a MILAB,
Yes.
a military alien abduction, basically, in the sense of where a military induces screen memories into an alien abductee and to make them think that they've had an alien abduction when really it's just a military abduction.
Correct. And there's an agenda as to why that's happening as well. There may have been, from what I understand, there was, like I told you in one of the earlier episodes, that there was a treaty signed between Dwight Eisenhower and one of the species of Greys to remove a certain number of people from the planet for genetic alteration or genetic experimentation.
If I remember, Mulder did talk about that at the beginning as well.
But then it's somewhere along the line, it seemed to have become important for our military industrial complex, to also start in taking people against their will, using the same ARVs that we see out there. So a lot of these people that are getting abducted are not being abducted by an alien or an extraterrestrial. They're being abducted by their own government.
That
which is
doesn't
more-
mean that there aren't actual real alien abductions
Absolutely,
going
and
on.
people
And to
that-
clarify this,
Absolutely.
most people who are involved in my labs are have history of previous alien abduction experiences, and that's probably one of the main reasons why they're being abducted by military to get to figure out what the ETs had abducted them for, what they remember, what they know about their agenda. I mean, if you think about it, in a sense, it is a matter of national security.
Of course
For them
it
to
is.
go after and abduct these people in the way they do, they probably give them scopolamine, which is a drug that can completely make you completely susceptible to suggestion and susceptible to screen memories. To remember what a screen memory is a false memory over a real memory. And most alien abductees have this scenario. So, yeah. Continue, Phil.
And so, that's and that's very important to denote the two different kinds, because there's an agenda that the military-industrial complex is actually trying to achieve as well. And this may have something to do with what happened in the second episode, which has to do with, and this is what I think it is. There are children that are born onto this planet. Either they're incarnating spontaneously, they are aware of their incarnation, and what they're doing, they have special ability. Whatever that special ability is, they can teleport, they're telekinetic, they are extraordinarily intelligent, they can see different colors, they have sonar, they have radar, and whatever the different genetic properties that they have is. They're being sought out by our government for training, possibly to be inducted into our secret space program. There are, which isn't so secret anymore, apparently. But this is something that this is the sort of a sideline of the show, where we're sort of, if you're watching, and they're sort of heading in this direction with the two children who have special abilities. I believe these children exist. I would hope that they would start to step forward and start talking about their experiences, because there's nobody out there to help them, and it's got to be terrifying. And so I would really hope that if they're out there, that they would start to seek contact and help us out, and maybe even hit us up if they want to.
What was actually going on, Phil, in the second episode with the kid at the end who was putting that high ultrasonic pitch into people's ears? Like, what was going on there? Did you understand that?
Yeah, I did. Okay, so one of the abilities that that some of these kids have is that it's like a communication that only works on a certain frequency. They can adapt. They've learned how to tap into our frequency as human beings, and they can bypass it. And it's like having a earbuds in your ear that only you can hear, and it's this high pitched shrieking frequency that a lot of people have reported that they have. There may not be voices associated with it, but in this particular episode, he could actually speak through the sound and connect to somebody that he was reaching out for help. And so this is something that people have experienced. There is some evidence that people do have these kinds of abilities, and I think it's real important to look at that. This is not some science, this is a fringe science. This is something that not a lot of people know about. There are, a lot of different abilities that people have. I thought that was a fascinating thing, and I thought the whole premise of the school that the doctor had created with all of these different children that had all these very rare diseases. Where did these rare diseases come from? We've never heard of some of these, but they're apparently there. So there's somewhere in this country, I would imagine, maybe even here in the United States, somewhere nearby, where these kids are being taken against their will and held and studied like lab rats. And it's got to be terrifying. And if they do escape, They try to tell their story to a cop. Well, the cops are in on it. They're trying to tell their story to a military person.
Or they just sound crazy.
Or they just sound insane. Or they sound like they're on drugs because they're these 20-year-old kids running around saying, I can move things with my mind, or, whatever the situation is. This is in your face disclosure. This is happening. There's some place in this country where this kind of genetic experimentation from our government is going on. It's awful. It's heinous.
I also want to say too that the whole premise of the electronic disturbance thing going on within the Mulder's mind, and then the guy at the beginning who kills himself, that is actually going on in a different way than they portrayed in that episode of X-Files. It's going on through HAARP, where people can be targeted electronically through frequencies through the HAARP array. In Alaska. And if any of you guys don't know what HAARP is, there's so many applications and uses to HAARP that I don't have time to go into it on this episode alone. And it's very complex, but basically they can use that to target people, to target I heard a theory crazy about this, about Andrew Breitbart, who was targeted in 2012. He had some sensitive information on Obama, and supposedly this has happened to a couple people, where you can target someone with this antenna array to target right on someone's chakras, or we all have frequencies within our body where things resonate and vibrate at a certain rate. If you tune into that certain hertz frequency or kilohertz frequency, you can make someone's heart stop and make it look like a heart attack.
It's called being heart attacked. That's what the term is.
Well, that's just one application used for it. HAARP is used in the chemtrail program as well, in shooting, messing with the Earth's ionosphere.
One of the other things they disclosed too.
Yes, they did talk about that very briefly as well.
The weaponization of our food, which is a real big one. That's really important because it's clearly happening that our food is being targeted. They're putting things in our food that are creating obesity. When I was a kid, in the 60s and 70s, there were, in our classes, we'd have 20 skinny kids and one fat kid, and now it's 20 fat kids and one skinny kid. Something changed, and it's all of this horrible.
Well, it's very clear now that we're having information come forward that a lot of this is attributed to the genetically modified wheat.
Yes.
And there's a couple authors out there talking about something that is a term coined now as wheat belly. And basically what this does, in a very quick way of saying it, is that the genetically modified wheat somehow has this expanding or bulging inside the stomach. It also creates addictive properties where when you don't have it, you get depressed. And I recently just cut wheat out of my diet the last 2 weeks after I learned about this. And I got to tell you, really?
Yeah.
How much better do you feel?
I feel, I cut most of the wheat out of my body a long time ago, and I've lost over 28 pounds.
Yeah, I instantly started losing weight when I got off it. And I noticed I don't have the fleeting up and down mood swings, I guess you could say. Not really mood swings, just my mood is very much more controlled in a level way.
Yeah.
Whereas before I would just get wildly depressed for no reason. And, I want to be in control of my emotions, not some genetically modified organism dictating it for me.
Right.
And that's part of us. This is that bypass of consent that we talked about in previous episodes. Right. It's like, if you don't do the research on what you're eating, you can't just assume that it is what it is. And then you assume, they wouldn't hurt us. So you're buying the genetically modified wheat, eating it, not knowing that by buying it, you're giving consent to eat it and to buy it and for it to keep getting made.
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing I can control in my life is my own food intake. Mm-hmm. So I have to be really careful about what it is I eat. I want to live a long time and I want to be healthy. And when they tell you something's a diet food, that just means to me it's just a chemical nightmare.
Something else about wheat that I learned at a David Wilcock lecture, I think it was at the Conscious Life Expo a couple of years back. He talked about how one of his whistleblowers, Pete Peterson, mentioned how wheat is now used as a biological weapon, has been for at least a decade, or if not more, in the sense that it's becoming abundantly clear that we cannot pay out Social Security were just in too much debt.
Yeah.
And somehow they've made this genetically modified wheat in a way where if you're around the ages of 63 to 65, which is retirement age, that it somehow has the ability, if you've had enough wheat in your lifetime of this genetically modified wheat, it can actually kill you around that time so that you cannot collect on the Social Security checks.
Yeah.
And that sounds so wild and fringe. And like, I mean, when I first heard that, I was like,
that, yeah.
cognitive dissonance, like crazy, you know,
Yeah.
like how could they initial that to happen in your body? And it's like, well, I don't know, if you think about it, it's like we're born with the cancer cells, and like sometimes those, and then in some people those cancer cells just turn on and become active. And what if by eating this genetically modified wheat, it's doing something very similar? And going back to HARP, turning on something where a hertz range lives, or genetic, or using a frequency to turn something on or off or stop something like your heart. Who says this HARP technology can't tune in and turn these genes on that kill you, or whatever it is that activates the technology?
Yeah, we don't know what it is.
What if it's nanites we're eating? You know, who knows?
Who knows? And more importantly, too, and also too, getting back to the second show on X-Files, really, they are, you know, the Department of Defense was the ones that were funding this man's research. If the Department of Defense is funding your research, that's a red flag, because they're not looking to find out how it can benefit mankind. They're looking to find out how they can weaponize
it. Yeah.
And so if you have a kid that can, you know, target a signal in your brain and speak to you directly into your brain, that's a really powerful weapon, and that's a very frightening thing for us. That would make you a security threat.
Well, we actually have documents, declassified documents of this kind of technology being used in around the time of Operation Desert Storm with I can't remember if it was actually implemented or used or not, but Project Bluebeam. The whole premise behind Project Bluebeam is that you can influence almost the sense of it being like a mass hallucination, but you can do a fake alien invasion, a fake second coming of Christ, Buddha, Allah, whatever you want to do, put a little movie screen in the sky for everyone to see and have sound attached with it. Very well that, you know, with the chemtrail program going on with all these nanites in the sky, literally, and like the heavy metals, that sound could be bounced off those heavy metals in the sky to create the full package of audio and visual, not necessarily hallucination, but it's actually happening to the point where massive groups of people could see this. And they could even fake the, you know, Antichrist. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. If you see a 900-foot Jesus, be skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying. You know, that's not, it just doesn't seem like something.
Well, going back to with the X-Files episode, like the ability to make somebody hear certain things that are not there we have that.
Yeah, we do.
It's not
and almost
far
everything
off
you
in the
saw in
future.
the show, we have. You know, the cloaking technology exists. The ARVs exist. And you know, these enhanced people exist. It may be a genetic upgrade. It may be an anomaly we don't know. But whatever these kids are going through, it's got to be horrific for them. They must be just absolutely terrified and stuck in these horrible, you know, asylums, and studied and poked and prodded to find out how they can be weaponized. It's just got to be awful. That episode was very eye-opening to me, and I hope that they continue to sort of push, you know, give us more of that, because I want to see where that goes.
Same here. And I also want to applaud, you know, the people who put the story together for that first episode for doing such an incredible job in bypassing cognitive dissonance. Now, this is something that we briefly talked about, and we want to make a bigger deal about this in future shows. One of the main reasons why it's so hard for the general population to take these matters seriously at hand is because of something called cognitive dissonance. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, basically it's any set of new information that challenges your current worldview. And I've had a couple of friends where, like, I've kind of blown the lid off their cognitive dissonance, where they had to set a boundary with me, you know, and let me know, like, hey, like, I'm okay with not knowing this stuff. I'd rather think that I have a life in the future for me with a white picket fence, a dog, and a wife, And that's the reality I want to live in, not in a reality where ETs are real and our government's trying to kill us. And like, I had to respect that.
Yeah.
But I have to understand that it's not him that isn't wanting to do that. His brain has a very hard wall of cognitive dissonance up, and that's okay. And it's part of his journey to be either not be awakened by these things or to remain asleep, and or to become awakened. And so basically, when you're talking to your relatives or your friends and family about these kind of issues, and if you want to educate people more on this stuff, the key is to not get angry, or if they get angry because of what you're telling them, like, walk away. Like, just be aware that all humans are built with this mechanism in their mind. It comes from the fight or flight part of our brain.
Right.
And
it's also important too. This is what I do, and I a lot of like what Brian said. A lot of people are not ready to hear this yet, and to force this information on them when they're not ready to hear it can be damaging. You don't want to harm. You don't want to give somebody a negative experience with this very powerful information unless they're ready. And so I usually wait until somebody either comes to me or gives me a few clues so they ask me some questions. And I usually preface it with, okay, the information that I'm about to tell you may change the way in which you view the world. Are you ready to hear that? And then let them answer. And if they say no, then I stop talking. I'm like, okay, if you in the future you feel like you want to talk more about it, by all means, let's talk about it. But and that goes for anybody. If you're listening to this show and you go running to your 90-year-old grandmother and say, listen to what I just heard, please take a little moment to actually just think about who you're presenting your information to, so you don't scare them, so they can actually, if they do decide to have an experience like this, they start to listen to us or they start to listen to other people, that they can have a positive experience and start to learn about this on their own. Okay, guys. Well, that wraps it up for us on this episode today. If you guys like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Apple Store, and be sure to give us like this if you liked it. Leave us some comments. We want you guys to be involved in the conversation. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we'll be back very soon with another podcast, and we hope you guys have a great day. Everybody have a great day. Thanks for listening.